Let's talk about it, Aaron Murray. Is LSU kind of, are they more in danger, or are they more dangerous with Tennessee having to go to Death Valley at 11 a.m. this weekend?
Well, I know we've talked about this 2 weeks ago when the schedule came out. Like, if this was a night game, I'd feel a lot better if I was an LSU fan. Like, playing there at night, you give those fans the entire day to get T-Bob liquored up, feeling juicy like we are on snaps on Saturday nights. Then, yeah, that's a hell of an environment. That's intimidating. And you can kind of expect something to what they did versus Mississippi State a few weeks ago, winning that football game. Offense is very similar. Mississippi State wants to spread you out. They want to go up tempo. They want to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands. The big difference between the two is, one, the tackles for Mississippi State are awful. Like, if you watch Mississippi State, one of their very few weaknesses of the football team is they can't protect on the edges. And B. Joe Ojulari just completely took off, used the crowd noise to advantage, was able to essentially make Will Rogers extremely uncomfortable the entire game. Tennessee's better on the edges. Tennessee's a better offensive line in general. Tennessee also is committed to the run a little bit more, and not just with Jabari Small, but Hendon Hooker. Will Rogers, hell of a quarterback. Love the guy. One of my top quarterbacks in my rankings this week. But what Hendon does with keeping a defense at bay, of really a defense line not being able to completely teeing off because they know they need to contain him as a runner, is a big issue. So I don't see LSU having as much success like they did versus Mississippi State, because Hendon Hooker is a better quarterback. Hendon Hooker is a tremendous runner. I think that's going to disrupt them a little bit. But overall, I think LSU does match up well. Like, you look at what they have on the back side of that defense, those DBs. I think some of the most talented DBs. I love their nickel. I love their safeties. I think they're going to be able to kind of, play a little bit more man, add an extra defender in the box to slow down the run, and see if they can win some one-on-one battles on the outside. So there is a chance, T-Bob, and even at 11 o'clock in the morning, I'm sure your Bayou faithful will be rowdy and ready to go to support their team. But right now, Tennessee's just a better football team. Tennessee is a better football team.
Yes, I agree. We got Jungle Boy in the chat saying Tennessee 31, LSU 17. Kirby Visor is saying if LSU can generate pressure and a few sacks, watch out. Bayou Bengals might be cooking up an upset in Death Valley. There is one odd thing. Despite the 11-8, and let's be painfully clear, the kickoff talk is probably a bit outsized in terms of how much we're mentioning it. Are there slight advantages to be gained or lost therein? Sure, right? But I think it's like you said, the scarier part is Hendon Hooker. And like this actual Tennessee team, I don't care what time you have to play these cats, Hendon Hooker's incredible. He's a true dual threat that can also throw the prettiest deep ball in the entire country. And intermediate and whatever. He can throw them all.
And coming off a bye week too.
And coming off a bye week, right? So healthier, locked in, 2 weeks of prep time. LSU has been actually surprisingly good at 11 a.m. If you look here recently, I think it was a big win last year against Florida. They had a huge win, Joe Burrow, in 2018 against a very highly ranked Georgia team that felt kind of similar to this. It was pretty wild, actually. Georgia took over Death Valley. LSU fans did not expect to be able to win. And I think it was like 40,000 or almost like 30,000 Georgia fans ended up in that building that day, but LSU ended up getting it done. That said, if I'm being objective, LSU is in trouble this weekend. And I find it very hard, Aaron, and I have a homer argument I can lay out, but I do find it very hard to craft an argument for how I should tell anyone that you should expect LSU to win. And let's just look at a thing called recency bias, right? Which you can say, oh, T-Bob, this is small samples, all that. But how am I supposed to tell you, Aaron, that you should believe in the team that just threw for 5 second-half yards against Auburn and allowed Robbie Ashford to throw for 337? Robbie Ashford and his legs and the threat therein went for 337 for you, and he missed a bunch of throws. So you're telling me that now, like, you had multiple coverage busts against that Auburn team. Tennessee generates, it seems like, 5 or 6 coverage busts a game in which Hendon Hooker just finds someone completely wide open. Tennessee averages 7.3 yards per play to LSU's 5.3. Like, I just can't sit there and tell you that LSU team is going to win.
No. And Kirby Visor in the chat says LSU needs Tennessee to essentially turn the ball over and shoot themselves in the foot. The one issue is they don't turn the ball over. Hendon Hooker is one of the most or one of the best quarterbacks in all of America of not giving the ball away. He's been that since day one. The guy does not throw interceptions. Watch me right now jinx the absolute crap out of him and him go out there and throw like 3
Good.
interceptions.
I hope you do, dude.
Yeah. A lot of LSU fans hope that he does, but he doesn't. And the reason why is because he knows he's such a good runner, and he's not going to take those chances. If it's not there, he's mature enough at 24 years old to take it, run it, and get what he can get and get down. So that's why he doesn't throw interceptions. My biggest issue right now with LSU, and you talked about it, it's the passing game. But what the hell is up with Kayshawn, man? Like, Kayshawn's supposed to be the guy. Kayshawn's coming out there saying that he's the best receiver LSU's had in the past decade, and he's barely played. And when he's in there, he doesn't seem very interested. Like, he doesn't seem like he wants to be out there playing football. He was given the magic number, which was supposed to excite him and make him feel like a leader of the football team. And right now, to me, Kayshawn is more of a distraction than a benefit. And I'll let you hit on that more. Obviously, you being in Baton Rouge and being around the team and kind of watching it up close. But every time I turn on the channel and watch LSU football, I see a guy that's pouting. I see a guy that wants the attention on him, a guy that doesn't seem like he wants to be out there. And we all just keep talking about him. And it's a distraction. We talk about cancers in the locker room. To me right now, Kayshawn is a cancer. And I think a decision has to be made, man. If you don't want to play football, then pick up and leave.
So I will say this. I still think that, unfortunately, the time this season when LSU had the most eyeballs on them, his body language was absolutely awful. And that was against Florida State. It feels like since that moment, it has improved, right? He was out there celebrating with his teammates against Auburn this weekend. Like, it feels like the buy-in is kind of there. What is not there right now are the numbers. And they're really not there for any wide receivers for LSU. And we talked about it. This is probably never going to be an offense that's going to generate big numbers for any receivers. But Aaron, one thing I did love hearing out of Brian Kelly in yesterday's press conference, and I'll pick your brain on this. As a quarterback, what's your reaction to this? Where Kelly basically said, look, we are far too conservative. Like,
yep.
I'm glad we haven't thrown any picks this year, but that's also kind of a red flag because we're not going for anything. Like, eventually we have to accept that mistakes will come, but that the greater good of the wins that we can get in going for these big plays will help. So, like, what's it do to you as a quarterback? If you're Jaden Daniels and you've been trying to play so perfect and you hear your coach say, hey man, let's take some shots. Let's start going for it a little bit.
Well, I think the issue with, first of all, you have thrown 2 picks. Garrett Nussmeier threw 2 of the worst picks I've ever seen in my life.
So no, Jaden Daniels. He was talking about Jaden Daniels specifically.
Yes. I think the problem is Jaden's your best athlete on offense. Jaden's your best runner, and his instinct is protect the football, which is smart. And when things aren't there, their best plays have been when he turns up and runs the football. Like when nothing's open down the field, him saying, hey, instead of me trying to force the ball in there for a potential big-time play, let me just pull it down and run the football, which has worked out more times than not. And I don't hate him doing it.
I feel.
But you also but you also do look at the receiving core, and it is a very, we said at the beginning of the season, one of the most talented receiving cores in all the SEC with Malik Neighbors obviously had a rough first game on special teams, but is playing great when it comes to just being a receiver, making some great plays. Jure's playing great. Besh has had his moments there. Like, there are plenty of guys that can win one-on-one battles. I agree. Like, Jaden just needs to let it rip at times. He is playing a little bit cautious. He is playing to, get through my first read, maybe get to my second. If it's not there, I trust my legs more than my arm getting through the progression. So I think that will get better and better with time. It's like, as a quarterback, the more you go back and watch the film and say, okay, this play versus this coverage, this guy ended up being open. And the more times you see it, the more times your mind tells you just trust it and get to it and just throw the football instead of, essentially relying on his athleticism. So it will get better, But at the same time, too, like, I don't want to tell him not to run the football. Like, right now,
No,
that is
no,
the
not at
best part
all.
of their offense.
Exactly, and that's something. Let's be clear. You're threading a needle here, right? I'm not saying
Yes.
like it's one all because you don't want to take away from who he actually is, and that's what we've said from day one. And maybe it allows you to control the ball a little bit more this game. Maybe it allows you to well, I was going to say control the kind of flow of the game, but Tennessee doesn't give a damn about really having the ball. They're just going to say no. Every time you give us the ball, we are just going to score. So look, Daniels, I do think if you're going to win this game, though, Daniels does have to be drastically better. Like with his arm, he can still run the ball as many attempts as he has every game this year, but he's going to have to be drastically more effective when he does
Yep.
choose to throw if you're going to beat Tennessee. Okay, last homer thing here before we move on. If I wanted to go full homer and craft an argument for LSU, first thing would be this. Can Matt House put together a game plan for a Heupel and Hooker like he did Will Rogers and Mike Leach? If you look at Will Rogers' game log right now against Memphis, 450 yards, 5 touchdowns. Against Arizona, 313 yards, 4 touchdowns. Against Bowling Green, 409 yards, 6 touchdowns. Against A&M, 329 and 3 touchdowns. Against LSU, 214, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. By far, not even close, his worst game of the year. And LSU's defense right now is actually pretty frisky, even with the busted coverage. It's like maybe, and to be clear, Matt House and Kelly gave credit to Auburn. They basically said, look, they had a completely different game plan than we thought they would coming in, and that got us on our heels early on. So if I want to go homer, maybe House can line up more with what Heupel and Hooker are going to seek to do, and maybe they come up with something there. Maybe Jaden Daniels clicks in the same way Anthony Richardson did, where he threw for 30 more combined yards in this one game than he did the 3 previous, first 2 scores a year. And then here's the probably the best thing if you're trying to craft a homer argument, the line. The line is odd. It's a little stinky. Like I said, wait, you're telling me the team that just threw for 5 and gave up 330 to a quarterback who can't throw and is now playing Tennessee, the number 1 offense in the country, you're telling me that game is -3 right now, open at -4, and the money came pouring in on LSU? That's a little head-scratching. Still, that's not exactly a great foundation to build this argument on. So, no, I do not expect LSU to win. But, hey, man, that's why you play the game. One thing to watch. Both these teams right now are in Murray. 1 and 2 in the SEC in terms of turnover margin. So, kind of talking about both sides of my mouth. Need to be more risky, but also try to win that turnover battle. We'll see.
Well, I think what last thing for me, just thought on how LSU could find a way to win this football game. You gotta eliminate the explosives. Like Tennessee's built. You talk about Hendon Hooker with the deep ball. They're built on the quick screen, and then all of a sudden you come up and we're gonna take a shot, and all of a sudden it's a 60, 70, 80-yard touchdown, and it kind of deflates the defense. Like if Tennessee's gonna score, like, let's be serious. Like I don't care how good your defense is. Tennessee's going to get theirs, and you kind of have to get the rhythm of their offense. You have to figure out the tempo. It's a big adjustment defensively, but if you make them earn it, that's the best way to see if you can squeak out a turnover. That's the best way to see if you can win this football game. Don't make it a track meet, because if you're going to make this thing a track meet, we saw it versus Florida. If that's the type of the game, Tennessee's going to eventually run away with it, just like they did versus the Gators. You need to make this low scoring. You need to make it be 10 to 15 play drives. You got to make this a game that's in the 20s and low 30s. Because if you get to mid to high 30s to 40s, you're not good enough on offense to keep up with what they can do on their side of the football on offense.
Yeah, I agree. I also think, Aaron, a lot of times, this is just if you want to create an upset, somebody is probably going to have a breakout performance that like John Emery's maybe a good candidate for this, right? Somebody who was the number 1 running back in the country coming out of high school for various academic kind of BS reasons, had to deal with a lengthy suspension, finally back now, really started to flash in that Auburn game. Really your only thing you had going for you offensively. Maybe he builds on that. Again, these are all very flimsy foundations to be building upon. So I like Tennessee. We'll know more. I plan on watching a lot more Vol film this week.